well. As everybody is coming in, please feel free to add into the chat off to the side where you're listening from, what city. We've got people registered from all across the country to talk about a very important topic of digital trends. So we're excited to have you all here. I am going to really quickly get us live streaming on Facebook, as I also admit people, so don't mind me as I multitask. Hope all of you guys are doing well today. Happy Friday, we made it. Yay. Who's excited? Tanita is, I like that. You're just pure sunshine. I love that you're here. I'm glad I get to see you 2 days in a row. All right. Let's see here. I wish there was a better way to start this other than just me awkwardly like clicking and you all just waiting for me. The live stream, it just kind of sits there. And if I don't do it right away, it kind of just, it relapses and then it doesn't work. And I don't want that to happen. Oh, but on that note, let's see if I can talk and multitask at the same time. Next week, I'm going to try using StreamYard. Have any of you guys used StreamYard before? If you have and you have tips, tricks, ideas, email me at amy@togetherindigital.com. I'm going to try streaming onto our YouTube channel, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So I've been working on that, but that's going to be like a new user experience for me. So I've used Social Live before.
Yeah.
And that worked out really well. But I'm like, I'm not going to lie, I'm a little anxious because I've gotten so used to like this process.
We actually just signed an agreement with Social Live, so we'll be using it for some Deloitte live streaming as well. So
Nice.
yeah.
Great. Yeah, we could probably do like a whole another chat or session on
live
game because it's going to be something we're just continuing to do for a while, isn't it? All right, get all my windows here sorted. Awesome. We've got folks listening in from St. Louis, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Cincinnati, North Canton, Ohio, Ann Arbor. Hi, Ann Arbor. Hi, Constance. How are you? Long time no see.
Good to see you, Amy.
More Columbus and Cincinnati, Chicago, Texas. Awesome. Great, great, great. Well, it's nice to see you all. Thank you for joining us. We are Together Digital. If you have not been to any of our events, She Rocks is a weekly series where we feature women who rock. And today we have with us the fabulous Meredith Howard. Meredith actually joined us at our last virtual summit on December 16th. All talking about, what was it about? I've already moved on to the next one.
My session was called Embracing the Social Media Evolution in a Post-COVID World. So embracing digital, not just because we were forced to, but because there's a lot happening. There's a moment happening.
Yeah. And it was great. I was fortunate enough to be able to sit in that workshop, and all of our members have access to those recordings and our attendees. So if you happen to attend that summit, check out our Vimeo and you can get to our recordings of our past events. So, all right. Oh, all these admits. Awesome. Well, it's so great to see you all here. Like I said, my name is Amy Vaughn. I am the CEO of Together Digital. Together Digital is a national organization for women-X who work in digital and digital adjacent fields. So we pretty much have a long list of women-X who are members. They're coming into digital, they're returning to digital, they want to be more digital. We're all a little digital anymore, so we're pretty loose about that criteria. But really what we offer is super unique. We're more than just a networking community. We are more than just networking. We are a community. Even in the midst of COVID and a pandemic, my job, I feel, is to do everything that I can to provide all of you opportunities to connect and create deeper, more meaningful relationships in the midst of all of this insanity, because we need that and we need each other now more than ever. And so I'm really excited about this upcoming summit that we're doing on March 25th. It's going to be all about power moves. I'm sure all of you have seen, and I think Meredith, you even shared it in LinkedIn the other day, that over 140,000 people lost their jobs in December, and all of them were women, net, as far as what was gained and lost. So, and it specifically impacted women of color. Especially, there's even deeper numbers in there that maybe get a little more depressing, but we're just going to stay upbeat right now. And we're going to be looking forward to a summit in March called Power Moves that is going to be about leadership, Money and Tech for Women X. So be sure to check it out. I dropped a link to the page just in the chat there. Be sure to check that out. If you're not a member as well and you want to try our community out, we have an amazing Slack community that offers a number of benefits. In fact, I recommend if you sign up for a membership, our month-to-month plan right now gives you a first month free trial. Sign up and do a one-on-one with me. I love to sit down with our women and really figure out what are your goals so that I can point you in the directions of the right member benefits, because we do everything from book clubs to members only yoga, all the way to like deeper workshops and more kind of mentorship pairing when we can. So a lot of opportunities, a lot of cool things happening within the group. It can feel overwhelming. So if you're interested in membership, the next best step would be check out the website. And if you do sign up for that first month free, reach out to me. I want to talk to you. I want to hear what you're struggling with and how we can help, because we have so many amazing women and opportunities to make the best of what we've got going on. Awesome. And then last, please share. I always forget to ask that. Like, tag Meredith, add her on LinkedIn, tell her how amazing she is after this, because you're all going to believe it after you hear her talk. And yeah, share Together Digital. I think, you know, get the word out that there's such thing as women supporting women. All right, I think that's everything off my checklist. Now we can get to what you all came for today. We are talking about digital trends with Meredith Howard, as I said earlier. Meredith is a global social media content strategist and leader. She has worked over the last 10 years on award-winning digital content strategies for Fortune 500 brands, such as Wells Fargo, Western Union, Morningstar, Inc., Yum, I love them, and now Deloitte as their global social and digital media team lead. She also serves as adjunct marketing professor at St. Edward's University in Austin. So I love that on top of everything you do, you teach, Meredith, and I think that came through so well in your workshop. Again, if you didn't get a chance to check it out, go back and watch the recording. It was fabulous. She also helps to lead some of the global education organization at the General Assembly to build and teach technology and marketing, digital marketing focused workshops for students considering a career change. So again, check it out, Meredith. You do absolutely rock. Thank you so much for being here with us again today.
Thank you. Thank you. This is clearly I like talking about marketing, right? Because like even like my side hustle, I told my husband that one day, like I'm gonna give digital marketing as a track, like the old college try, like really take it to like the highest level that I possibly can. And then I'm gonna like make soaps in my bathroom and open an Etsy shop. Like just like do the exact opposite, like make something with my hands, you know, like it's you know, because even in my side hustles, I'm teaching digital marketing. So I'm inundated in this industry. So I think I need a hobby.
I don't know how many of you can relate. Definitely add so as the chat, but yes, absolutely. In fact, my husband for years when I was still in marketing and advertising was like, you need to get a hobby.
Yeah.
So with COVID, I absolutely have, but yeah, I think it's so essential, but it's, you know what, you live and breathe it and you do it so well. So
thank you.
We're really glad that you're with us today. So I'm going to just get right to our questions. We're doing this as a Q&A session. So I want to encourage every one of you who are listening. I know you might be multitasking. I know you might be eating lunch, but I want you to get the most out of this time in this session that you are taking for yourself. So if you can set aside some other things for the next 40 minutes, I think we'll be okay if you do. Make sure that you're listening, make sure that you're asking questions. I have a number of questions for her, but I want to make sure that you are getting out of this what you came for. So knitting keeps me sane. I absolutely agree, Carolyn. Maybe we should do a virtual knitting / crochet circle sometime.
There you go.
Okay. So this past year has been pretty rife with uncertainty, a pandemic, social unrest, political division, and a changing landscape. You know what, actually, before I even get to that, I want to back up to you. Was there anything else outside of your bio that I missed that you want to touch on and tell us about yourself? I'm sorry. I get so excited about the questions.
Well, I think it's important to also note, kind of actually speaking to what you were just referring to, right? Mm-hmm. That there's this deep social unrest that we live in, mm-hmm. And something that is perhaps an outlet of mine that is not related to digital marketing, but sort of still is I got my degree in journalism, and that was because I was really passionate about writing. That was just something that I always did when I was younger. I journaled, I always wrote. And so I thought I wanted to go into reporting when I went to college, and quickly learned that that probably wasn't the most lucrative option for someone graduating in the middle of a recession. And so I ended up working in content marketing because they hired writers, right? And that was what I brought to the table initially, was my ability to write and tell stories. Since then, I've always used writing as a creative outlet for myself. So I actually created a blog when I was in my early 20s called Job Offers and Bad Boyfriends, where I talked about the parallels between job hunting and dating. So kind of let your mind run wild with that metaphor for a moment if you want. But now I've kind of pivoted into talking more about just career and professional development, but also relationships. And why I bring that up now is I've always been very open in my writing, talking about my own relationship with my husband. My husband is Black. And so in the recent year, I've started to stand out a bit more publicly about my own feeling about the current environment that we live in. And to be honest, there were some times when I hit publish that I was nervous that potentially my employer might see what I was saying. And so, as I'm also talking about, the brand that I work for, I'm talking about my own personal beliefs. And I think that actually speaks to a trend that we're seeing, is like, where's the intersection, right, in that? And where's the differentiation in what brands say and what people say about these very polarizing issues? They're not polarizing to me. Human rights is not political to me, but it has been made inherently political. And so I think that that's maybe some important context for everyone on the call as I go in and I talk about some of these things, because I've had a lot of, I actually wrote a blog post about this conundrum that I've had in my own head about managing a brand without infusing my own bias, right? When it comes to responding to a lot of what's going on. So that's maybe some interesting content.
No, it's a perfect segue, because my first question was basically that, because there is so much going on in this past year, it's really not just changed like what we put out there, it's changed how we engage with consumers. It's been put into question a great deal by a number of brands. And so what are some of the challenges brands must continue to face and overcome in the coming year when it's in regards to how they engage? And again, more with a consumer, not like us personally, although I think that's a good tip, is to kind of make sure like your bias is staying out of it.
Yes. I mean, like what we say is like brands need to be human, right? But humans are inherently flawed, which makes it, which if we can allow ourselves some empathy for brands to be inherently flawed as well, right? And I include my own company and the brands that I've worked at in that, right? We've made some mistakes, and there's moments when we've hit it out of the park. The reality of the situation that we're living in, especially because now almost all messaging it hits first on digital. I should say hits first on social. I always use the example of like, if you're watching the morning news, like, no, nothing against those reporters. They're doing a great job, but they're essentially reading Twitter feeds. Like that's what they're doing. They're reporting on what's broken on social, right? So that's that pressure to show up in an authentic human way on a platform that is immediately going to be seen by millions of people, potentially broadcasted on national news. It's a lot of pressure, right? And so you're going to mess up sometimes, and you're going to hit it out of the park sometimes. The reality is, the people, the consumers on these platforms are engaging more than ever in calling out brands and calling out others for misspeaking, not being transparent, hypocrisy, all of those things. And so there's like a decision tree that you need to go through in your own head to understand what you should say. Well, honestly, should you say something? And then if you do say something, what that should be, what should be the context of it. And I mentioned decision tree because that's literally what we've created. We've created a physical, decision tree to determine when we respond and how we respond, and who within the organization is best suited to do that. And I'm speaking from a very big brand perspective, but honestly, this trickles down to even your small mom and pop shop within the community. In fact, even more so, because they're more reliant on their patrons to be loyal to their brand. So, and I've actually had some conversations with a dear friend of mine who owns a coffee shop a stone's throw distance away from my neighborhood, and asked him, what I'm curious. I know what Deloitte is doing, right? I'm in that every day, but what is your local coffee shop? How are you responding to this? Especially last week. And he said, we've chosen to not make our business about that. That's a choice that we've made. Back in June, after George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter protest, they decided to donate all their tips to the Austin Justice Coalition. I live in Austin, by the way. And they made that choice there. But over the last week, they decided to not add fuel into the conversation. They decided to just, focus on coffee and making people happy through the coffee, and so, but and we could argue both sides there. I think the important thing to note is that people are paying attention to it. And that's not going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, that's super smart. So I think some sort of decision tree makes a lot of sense, because it's so important to hold integrity for your brand and through brand character. And the only way you do that is by acting within character. Because as soon as your brand, like, all of a sudden goes out on a limb on something they've never gone out on a limb for, of course, people are going to call it out. It's one of those things, like, it actually came up last night during our book club. So we do a virtual book club for members, and we read this book called Self-Care. And it's like a huge satire on member organizations and self-care. And it was a really great read. And the author was actually on there with us. And one thing she said is, like, it's so funny because it seems like anymore people treat themselves as brands, and brands like people. And that just was like, whoa, that made my head spin quite a lot. So I think something like a decision tree, is such a smart tactic and tool, especially knowing that we had so much to learn from out of 2020. I think it does make sense to sit down with your leadership group and say, what are the choices? When do we need to speak? Because if we are a meat packing company, do we really need to have an opinion on X, Y, and Z? And I see certain, the ones that knock it out of the park from a digital standpoint are the ones that have clearly have made those thoughts and decisions beforehand. I mean, everybody throws out Ben and Jerry's. They have the values, they know what and where they can speak on, and then they do. I think another one that was really great recently has been Uber. The executive creative director, global executive creative director, was on a She Rocks a few months back, and they were doing things like giving people free rides to the polls, because that's what they do. They help create movement for people and mobilizing people. So that was a part of their value. So it made so much sense for them to create then a social program that allowed them to facilitate that thing. So I think that's super, super smart. I will say too, if any of you are curious as to, we had another really awesome guest in the past, Nadini Jami. You may have heard of her in the news. She is out there kicking butt, taking names, and Check My Ads is another great place to just look at and find out where advertising and spending are going, so that you can then make sure that your company is not supporting or having ads living on pages that maybe don't align with your values. That's another big trend I've been seeing. And this whole notion of cancel culture too, we'll definitely get back to that at some point in this year as a talk. But are there any other longstanding effects that the pandemic and social unrest do you feel like has had on marketing that we didn't touch on?
Well, just to add to that point there about, you can't manufacture authenticity, right? Those are inherently two different things, right? So, Uber and Ben and Jerry's are so successful because they've always operated in this way, right? Like Ben and Jerry's has always been very progressive, right? So it doesn't feel out of the blue that they come out and say, and are quite bold, very bold, some of the boldest. It's very on brand for them. I say on brand all the time, by the way. It may get annoying after a while, but it's very on brand for Ben and Jerry's. It's on brand for Uber, right? Is it on brand for Deloitte or some other organizations? Maybe not so much. So in that case, what I advise is pull back the curtain, be more transparent, and say, we're working on it. Don't try to say something like, we are this way, if you're not. That's where you get into trouble because, Ben and Jerry's and some of the other brands have built a lot of sweat equity in these particular areas. And that's great. That was part of their values. If you're a brand where that's becoming a value of yours, or that's just something that you're now stepping into, be transparent about that. And that's the best that you can do in this environment. So I'll say that. In terms of kind of other digital, how this has had an impact on marketing is, it's this balance of for me, I think more time spent interacting online, right, means that people are inundated with more messages for longer, at all times, right? It's like before you had some reprieve from it because you were going out and doing other things, and now everything has been made digital. Normally, at some point maybe we would have been sitting in a room together and interacting, and now we're on our computers, which makes us more susceptible to look at other things on our computer or on our phone, right? And so brands are excited about that because it's like, all right, we can now more easily reach our customer because we actually know where they are now. They're at home watching Netflix. So there's some power in that, but again, it's more about making kind of responsible choices of I think that brands who've really succeeded in this space in a post-COVID world is about quality over quantity. So less is more, really being intentional about the platforms that you're stepping into, and providing a lot more value than noise. I like to say being the signal, not the noise, right? So brands who've been able to do that really effectively, I think have stood out amongst the rest in this pandemic. And of course, there's always going to be those new platforms that come out that are like very attractive, right? I mean, TikTok is one that really, it had massive reach and growth in the beginning of the pandemic, and it sustained that. But you may, if you're in this space at all, you may have heard inklings of like Clubhouse, or, I've heard Twitch is kind of a new thing right now. And it's very tempting to get on these platforms because like you're thinking it's the new best thing. My advice is focus on where your audience is, right? Not where you desire to be because that's the new thing. Focus on where your audience is and really optimize your content in the best way possible there. And I think LinkedIn is a great example. Like LinkedIn has recently, really gone hard with their live feature. And, so why try to step into TikTok when that's not necessarily a space for you? Maybe try to meet your existing audience where they are and give them new ways of value, to deliver valuable content. So, yeah, you kind of have to edit yourself a little bit in this space because it's so much at your
everyone to everything everywhere. So I think, everything you're saying makes so much sense. And actually some of the things you were saying led into some of my later questions. So we might go back to them. Okay. But I do think it's funny, having been myself in digital advertising and marketing for close to 15 years, for so long we were beating that drum, like over a decade of digital first. And finally, like, everything really has to be digital first. I was just kind of curious, do you feel like that's going to last once we're all like able to get out in the world again?
So I wrote a blog on this in August, and the title of the blog was called "The Digital Marketer's Argument for Billboards," because historically I have truly bashed billboards. In almost every conversation I've had, I was like, how can you possibly argue to me spending exorbitant amounts of dollars on a piece of content that cannot be optimized, that cannot be edited, that cannot be tracked, that people who are driving 65 miles down the interstate, who are looking at their phones anyway, right? Like, how could you possibly argue that that's a better mode of advertising or marketing than like a Facebook post, right? So that's been my narrative this whole, like, forever.
Yeah.
But then Oprah Magazine drops the mic and posts 22 billboards seeking justice for Breonna Taylor in Louisville, Kentucky. Okay. And suddenly I'm like, whoa, what just happened here is that something that was inherently like very traditional media, kind of old school media, now became a disruptor to digital media, which was used to be which digital media has always been the disruptor. We're going to disrupt marketing, right? You know, and then the reverse happened. And I was like, wow. So here's the thing, pick your moments, right? Like, when does it make sense to disrupt your own audience's experience? As long as you continue to add value and purpose, right? You're doing it purposefully. No, not everything has to be digital. Digital is always going to be there. I think of it now as a constant. It's just who's optimizing better is ultimately gonna, you know, stand out amongst the rest. Who's being more human, who's doing a lot of the things that we're talking about is going to stand out. But pick your moments for disruption, right? Another great example of this is all real life. I like to use real life examples because I don't like to speak in like, you know, theoretically. I'm attending Zoom's conference over the pandemic. My best friend was actually speaking, and so I tuned into her session. Now, in true Meredith fashion, I shared on social media that I was watching my best friend speak at the Zoomtopia conference, right? So I share on social media, I tag at Zoom, and then immediately in my direct messages, Zoom responds to me and says, thanks for attending Zoomtopia. Like, so glad you liked the session. Hey, can you send us, you know, fill out this form and we'll send you a little gift for being such an active participant.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. So you know, the curiosity killed me. So I put in the form, you know, you know, this is where I live, and within, you know, a week, I got a little care package box from Zoom that had an adorable coffee mug that I drank coffee out of this morning that said, I survived 2020 on Zoom. And then I got some little pins that I can put on stuff.
Yeah.
And now 5 months later, I'm sitting here telling you women about it. Okay.
Yep.
And so what is that like? Zoom could have just added me and I would have felt satisfied because like Zoom added Miss Meredith Rose on Instagram. Yeah. But they went a step further and and so I'm like, I'm a believer in marketing swag. I think it's great, you know. That worked. That disrupted my typical experience where brands just reward you by like tweeting at you. And so pick your moments.
Yeah, no, Zoom is definitely a great example of that. I know that the Zoomtopia, for their speakers, I was listening to a podcast early on in the pandemic because I was trying to figure out even for us, like where do we pivot? What do we do? And they were talking about how they sent like care packs to all of their speakers that were going to be speaking virtually. And did like food delivery for them and things like that so that they could eat and still like attend the additional sessions outside of their own. So yeah, they are way, way on top of it. We did have one question come in. So before we get too far ahead on any other topics, I'm going to ask it. And this kind of harkens back, because I know we had a few people just join, to sort of when we're determining how, when, and where do we engage in certain aspects of marketing when there's so much going on in the world. So any thoughts on what to do when your executive leadership doesn't endorse or encourage more progressive public messages?
Gosh, I haven't run into an issue where they don't support us not saying anything. Typically, it's actually a debate on whether or not of who says it, right? Should it be the brand that says it, or should it be actually the humans behind the brand? Should it be the leadership? Should it be the CEO, right? In most cases, it's because leaders are very, they want to control the narrative a bit more, in which case I would actually encourage you to have a conversation with your executive leadership about what they should say, as opposed to what the brand should say. And I think that's a better entry point, because then the brand can simply amplify the leader, right? And what I would also encourage you to bring to them, and this was mainly my precipice for having these conversations with my leadership and with my brand team, is, you know, part of it is your audience, the people that follow you, your fans of your brand, your patrons, your customers. But the other part of this is your employees, right? And I knew that going into work the days after these big events happened is our 300,000 employees around the world, they want to know that they work for a brand that is paying attention or at least has something to say. And so whether that's an internal message or an external message, you really need to keep those people in mind too. And that felt like a big duh, right? Like obviously our employees want to know that the leadership at the company that they spend 8 hours a day at is aware and saying something. So and so maybe to kind of help there, it starts with an internal message, and then you have a conversation about how that response work, how that was responded to, and you take that external. But yeah. So
that makes a lot of sense. Hopefully you heard that, Kate. Okay, she said thank you. I saw another, like Catherine Houston joined. I was like, oh no, I hope she didn't have to leave and then come back and miss the answer. We're recording either way, so you can get it after. But
okay.
Glad that you got it, and it's great advice. So absolutely, thank you for asking the question.
Yeah,
Again,
good question.
what I love about all of you asking is that even if it doesn't feel like it's worth asking, it is, because I can guarantee you of the other, I don't know, nearly 40 women on this call, I bet they have the same question in their mind. So don't be shy. Okay, let's see. What else can we talk about here? Just shift gears for a second. Let's talk about the third-party cookie and how it's been a mainstay of online audience tracking, but now they're finally on their way out. So how has the crumbling of the cookie, how do you feel like that's impacted us, or will it continue to impact us?
So it's putting the precipice on brand. Well, it's putting the precipice on the user to determine what they allow brands to know about them or not, right? And so in terms of brands, it's a lot of what they have to do is on their own, kind of clean up their own house, right? So on every website that you go to in a future state, you're gonna be prompted with a question of whether or not you want to accept the cookies or not. Now, if you don't accept the cookies, then what that means is that a brand can't track a lot of the information that they used to track about you, unless there's some type of gated content experience that and again, but that's still on the user to give information. It's not just going to be automatically tracked. Okay. So what you may start to your experience as a user may change in that when you are, browsing, an Etsy shop, and then you go off Etsy and you go somewhere else, you may not see those ads like you used to on that new site, right? And so from a digital marketer perspective, that is definitely a big shift, right? Because if we're not able to access that website data, then we can engage in a lot of the types of retargeting and remarketing that we've done in the past. Now, I would encourage you to, I'm actually working directly with my my colleagues, my account managers on LinkedIn and Twitter to better understand how the platforms are complying with this, because that's an important piece too. And so they're going to make recommendations based on, your industry and what you've done historically. So I would highly recommend reaching out to them and working with them if you have that partnership. Also reading up on those specific platform compliance pieces or guidance would be something that I would recommend you do, because it is going to impact remarketing specifically. So that's something to think about. What I will say is, right, again, I mentioned that gated content where if you submit an email address, I'm sure many of us have done this. We've either signed up for a webinar or we want to download a report or white paper or something, and we've had to submit our email address to do that. You can insert language that this email address may be used to, update you on other advertisements or other things. And so as long as you have that disclosure agreement language in there, then you can use email lists to retarget content or remarket content on, social media or within Google Ads. And so So what does that mean? It means that you have to work a little bit harder on the top of the funnel to gain that loyalty, because people don't hand out their email addresses, right? Email addresses are precious, right? I don't know about you, but at the beginning of the year, I make a habit to go through my entire inbox and be like, why am I subscribed to this crap?
Yeah,
Right?
love it.
So it's like, so email addresses are precious. So you need to really build loyalty ahead of time before you expect someone to give you their email address. So that brand awareness, that brand eminence building at the top of the funnel there's more emphasis on that now. You can't really just phone it in by saying, well, I'll just do remarketing, and that'll eventually get people to consider my product.
That's so smart.
Hopefully that's helpful. Yeah.
No, that's really helpful. And I think those are some smart strategies. I was asking the group kind of, do they accept cookies? Because I'm kind of curious, like we're all marketers on the call, at least the majority of us are to some degree, or we just love ads. And it sounds like overwhelmingly people do accept them. Now, I'm not sure on the back end for a general consumer that isn't in our field if they're doing it as much, but it does seem like people are prone to accept those. But I agree with you on the emails, like that feels like another step, but it is a good strategy. And Sarah was just sharing on our holiday gift to clients this year was an email that sent them a landing page asking them to accept cookies. And then cookies from a locally owned minority business. How smart is that?
I love that. That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I mean, to be honest, like I always say, I make the joke that like, I know all the inner workings. I know everything that's going on. I am the most susceptible person to advertising you've ever met. Like I truly am. I'm like, ooh, that's fun. Like, oh, look I'm getting remarketed this. Like, I probably should put it in my cart. Like, I'm truly that person. And when it comes to accepting cookies, I probably shouldn't say this on, live, but I usually am just like, yeah, accept. Like, I need to be better about it, honestly. But truly, it's because I found that I learn a lot by my own experience online. And so I like to kind of be advertised to. It helps me understand the market.
Your attention, because if it gets your attention, then it's likely to get your audience's attention.
Yeah, right? Exactly.
That's so funny. Yeah, a lot of people were saying that they kind of almost love to do it just to learn and see how they get retargeted.
Right.
So earlier we talked a little bit, you kind of started to go into new and emerging platforms. There were a lot in 2020. Which ones do you feel like we should be paying attention to? And you can reemphasize what you said earlier and add to. And then also, which ones are you just excited about?
So yeah. I mean, I will say, like, it's absolutely okay to look to enter a new platform. Just make sure that what you're doing already and where you've spent a lot of sweat equity building an audience is you're not forgetting about them just because there's a bright, shiny new object, right? In fact, potentially use your existing platforms, as leverage to drive, people and say, hey, we're over here too, and the biggest thing I'll say about if you're looking at a new emerging platform is the content you deliver on that platform should be inherently different than what you provide on other platforms. Because why would someone follow you everywhere, right, if you didn't add value in each of those places, right? And we are seeing a lot more intersection of audiences on platforms. So, TikTok is a great example, right? So TikTok was first adopted mostly by younger people, right? Like 13 was like the age where one of the like average ages in the early days of TikTok. Fun fact now, TikTok has expanded the scope of their audience. 30% of users of TikTok are over the age of 30. So there is a bigger audience, in sort of the older generation, I guess that's me, by the way, of TikTok users. But what's also happening is that the highest growth of audience on LinkedIn is also teenagers. Right. So teenagers and college students are jumping on LinkedIn at almost the same rate. Right. Wow. So what does that mean? It means that like they're both there. Right. But the content is different because those platforms, putting your audience hat on, are opened with very different intentions in mind. Right. So I'm really excited about TikTok. I'm a spectator on that platform, meaning for me, it's about learning how that platform is being used and following a lot of different types of people on that platform. They're one of the like average ages in the early days of TikTok. small, platforms, or people who are, small businesses, but also people who are, influencers, and, beauty brands, things like that. I love kind of absorbing and consuming content before I make any kind of decisions about how a brand should go to market there. So I'd encourage you to do that. Be a spectator, be a consumer on the platform before you're like, we're going to come up with a TikTok strategy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited about TikTok. And I'm intrigued by Clubhouse. At Clubhouse, for those of you who aren't familiar, is it's a streaming platform that's solely audio. So you can join rooms on Clubhouse and have conversations about digital marketing, about anything. And you can be in rooms with people who are particularly influential in this space, but it's all just audio. It's like being on a group conference call, with influential thought leaders, right? And so what Clubhouse has done is they've taken a page out of Pinterest book back in the day, is they've made it extremely exclusive, right? So that you need an invitation, and then you as an invitee are allowed to invite one other person. And by doing that, they've made everybody like, well, I want
one. Oh yeah, that exclusivity still works. And by the way, for our members who are listening, because I know it came up in the chat and Facebook, I think it was maybe Irene. If you go onto our Slack channel for Together Digital, we have a channel just for Clubhouse, and everybody who has invitations are sharing their invitations.
Oh, good. There you go.
You can go there, and I got one yesterday. I've downloaded the app. I haven't gotten into it yet, but I also very much intrigued by it. I think, I kind of wonder how long it's been in the works, this notion of like, so much of what we do now is auditory. Podcasts have been evolving over this last several years. So it seems only natural that something like this would exist. So it's like one of those like, oh, well, no, duh. So it seems like they're playing their cards right. It'll be interesting to see how brands kind of live and work in that space at some point.
I think the press, I don't have any insider information from the founders of Clubhouse, although I'm sure that there's an interview popping up from them sometime soon. But I think that it was really the rise of podcasts that we saw over the last year or so that really contributed to the business case, frankly, that a platform like this may have some viability, right? What we like about podcasts is that we can be doing other things and still consuming content. Whereas right now, you could walk away and listen to me in another room, but like, generally speaking, this experience is partly valuable because we're looking at each other, right? And you've chosen to take part of this experience, but the advantage of a podcast or Clubhouse is you could be working out, you could be going for a walk, you could be taking care of your kids, you could be cooking, right? And that has some inherent value. That's kind of also meeting people where they are in this pandemic, which is trying to multitask and do a bunch of things at once. So I like the premise of Clubhouse. I get a little bit like, oh, the exclusivity piece is kind of annoying. Like, it's just but I get it because it's working. People are interested, partly because it's exclusive.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to see how it unfolds and evolves, even kind of post pandemic. But I agree with you. It is one of those things that's portable. And then I am a copywriter by trade. So I always felt so sad going into digital marketing and I've done more video and like digital advertising than radio, but I always clamored at the chance to do radio because as a writer, all you do is paint with your words. Like everything is down to what you're writing and how it's inflected by the performance that's being given. And so I just always loved that. So I do think, I know I'm kind of like excited to dig in and see what it's like as a former creative. I'm like,
tell me, report back to me on it. Cause I'm excited to eventually become a consumer of it, but, you can't go wrong. The other thing too about Clubhouse, right, is that it's people, right? So it's not brands, right? Yeah. So that's an important thing too. And that's a trend we didn't jump on, but I'll add it in, is what we saw across the board was more people stepping up and building their social and digital presences, and brands were kind of taking a back seat really in the last year. So we've seen more executives, like I think it's like 63% of C-suite executives are more active on social media this year than they were last year, because they felt they need to. They couldn't network at conferences in the way that they used to, right? So they had to be. And then generally speaking, brands have taken a step back and really allowed their employees to build their own social presence representing the brand. And so what's interesting about Clubhouse, right, is like, there are no brands on Clubhouse, right? There's people representing brands on Clubhouse, right? But, those are human beings. That's not, a social media manager behind the scenes, like pulling the levers. And so I think that on behalf of a brand. So I think that really speaks to the trend that we saw, which is that human beings, personal brands are taking, are having a little more weight in how content is consumed than in the past, when it was just a lot of brand content.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's an awesome trend. And on that topic of any additional trends, are there additional trends that you feel like the viewers on the call today need to know and need to really pay attention to that we haven't covered yet?
Well, one thing that I'll say, and this speaks to kind of value, but one of the biggest things that we saw two. One, they're unrelated. One of the biggest trends that we saw in a post-COVID world was this emphasis on learning. So generally speaking, all of these learning platforms that have traditionally done well exploded, like LinkedIn Learning, Skillshare, General Assembly, where I work, like all of these learning platforms have seen significant growth over the last 9 to 11 months. And that's because like people used this kind of reset time to learn new skills and upskill themselves in certain areas. And so while we've always recommended, as in the content marketing world, to, create content that's like, valuable in the sense that you're teaching someone something, or that, it's adding value in that way. Like, I would recommend like leveraging some of these existing learning platforms who've seen really big spikes in engagement and usership and membership, and create courses and create content on those platforms that really lean on that being their thing. So that's one area that I may recommend if you're kind of in a bit of a content desert right now and you're thinking, where is best, what type of content for me to create? You can never lose with learning, as long as it's valuable learning. And that's in high demand still. As long as we're in quarantine, it's going to be really in high demand, I think. Right. And then the second is this idea of leveraging influencers in a very different way. So in the past, we've seen celebrity influencers, right? We've seen micro influencers, which are 100,000 followers or less, I think is considered a micro influencer. But now we've shrunken even further to the quote unquote nano influencer. And nano influencers are people who have 1,000 followers, maybe, essentially we're taking the emphasis off of follower count and more of the emphasis on how much these people are engaging their own community, how loyal their own community is. I think when you really think about it, like, even if I'm just having brunch with 5 of my girlfriends and I tell them about Together Digital and all of them sign up, that's way more valuable to Together Digital than a celebrity talking about it, to their millions of followers and right. One person right. registering with it. Right. So I think that less is more, right? In that sense too. So when you think about less is more, it also applies to influencers.
Makes sense. It's more about their sphere of influence and how impactful they can be. And you're right. When you're talking to the masses, it's a drop in the bucket compared to like that across the table conversation. That's great. Amy had a great question as well. If we don't have enough staff on to branch out into any new platforms, could you talk about any new trends that you're seeing on Facebook and Instagram?
Yeah, I mean, Instagram is, if you're on Instagram, then you're golden, because Instagram is just brilliant at just taking the best of every other platform and applying it to their own channel. So, and here's what's great about that. So Instagram recently launched Reels. They've also launched guides. So they've launched all these I think that there's rumors that they're going to launch a version of Clubhouse, like an audio, like messaging experience. Like, so they're
time.
they're taking all this, right? They're taking a lot of what they're seeing consumers respond to and applying it to their platform. And they're really good at it. The reason that brands on Instagram like it is because we've spent the last, better part of a decade growing our presence on Instagram. So, there's less of a barrier to entry with some of these new forms of messaging if we use Instagram. The other thing to note is, so that's all what's happening on Instagram, all these new ways to talk and message and share content. The important thing to note about Instagram specifically is that when you leverage some of these new features on Instagram, be it reels, be it guides, be it new stickers, new ways to engage in your Instagram stories, Instagram rewards your account for that. So because they want people to see people using these new features, so their algorithm will tell Instagram to prioritize your content in the feed or in the story feed. So it's advantageous for you and Instagram, but you too, to start leveraging some of these new features. So I'll say that.
Yeah.
And then on Facebook, Facebook, people feel like Facebook is dying. It's not. Don't listen to that. Facebook's just being used a bit differently than it ever has before. So also, it is just more, we have to be really careful about the way we use Facebook as a brand, again, speaking to transparency, and misinformation. As a brand, you don't want to be caught up in that. So you have to, I would say, the biggest trend on Facebook and brands standing out on Facebook are ones who are adding a ton of value and not over rotating on volume on Facebook, but being really intentional there. And I think that, overwhelmingly so, as much as I'd like to say that, LinkedIn, does a good job with advertising, I think that they have, a lot of their advertising is superior. Facebook and Instagram advertising just allow for the most kind of flexibility and optimization with your ads. So something that we're seeing in Facebook now with advertising is it'll optimize your content in the middle of a campaign, meaning not just like, lower your CPC or up your, we're talking like they're going to edit your creative, like to make it more optimized for people who like video content versus, static imagery. And so their ad platform has gotten so sophisticated in really understanding behaviors and interests of their users, kind of in a creepy way, but also in a way that's really great for advertisers, because here again, you're getting the most bang for your buck if you leverage those platforms for advertising. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I've got another question here, another tactical question.
Okay.
She really, this is from Constance. I really appreciate, I really appreciate your tip on your blog about co-scheduling, considering using it with MailChimp, Google Docs, and Drupal. Our content sometimes gets disrupted by transfer/editing/copy/paste nightmares. Hear you there. Introduce errors with our team contributors. Has anyone else used it with MailChimp?
Using it with MailChimp, Google, well, so to be honest, I think the more that you can integrate different tools, I don't necessarily understand the question, Constance, if you're asking me if I've used it with MailChimp, but
Constance, if you want to add some clarity.
Yeah.
Sure. Just does it reduce copy paste errors? For example, when you're copying and pasting from Google Docs into MailChimp into Drupal, sometimes you're adding code and funky characters or formatting, and it's hard to just focus on content flow and messaging because you get pulled away in error correction.
So you're asking,
tactical, we don't have to go there either.
No. So you're asking if CoSchedule or a platform that's like, comparable to that would eliminate that error because it's integrated. Likely, yes. I haven't used it with it integrated with all of those platforms before, but yes, if there's integration with each of those platforms, it would eliminate a lot of the sort of human error that you typically see when you when you're, editing copy from one place or another. That of course is that's dependent on the content within co-schedule, or that sort of first touch point being accurate and final. So that's also something to think about too. But yes, I've seen more efficiencies than I've seen drawbacks from those integrations. Yeah. Any other questions?
That's exactly what I was saying. Oh, I like how we seemingly share a brain, Meredith. Yeah, we've just got a few minutes left. I want to make sure that we get everyone's questions answered. And also, again, like follow, Meredith's always sharing great content on LinkedIn. So send her a LinkedIn invite. And if you have other questions, let us know. We're happy to put you in contact with her. And then share as well, like what was the tip or the trend that you took away from today? Because again, your knowledge, you're sharing your power. Meredith was so kind as to share hers with us today. I think I had one more question. Does anybody else have a question though? No? Okay. So as we acknowledge and leverage our trends, how can we do that to help more strategically guide our clients and our company forward? I think sometimes trends get diminished as it's just a passing fad. So do you have any thoughts, ideas, and ways that we can leverage some of the things that we've learned today to actually, show value, show worth, and kind of help move the needle forward for our organizations?
I think the proof is in the pudding, right? So I think that whatever takeaways that you took away from this, or in your own personal reading, or investigation on trends, like start implementing one thing and seeing how that, like, I personally feel like my personal account is kind of the best guinea pig for a lot of the things that I ultimately recommend brands do or think about, right? I'm also like a lot of brands' target audience. So like it's good for me to understand, how users are using it. It helps me put my audience cap when I'm thinking about it from a brand perspective. I also I don't know if you follow Gary Vee or not. He's kind of, it depends on the day of the week or your sort of attitude or mindset at the time. But one of the biggest recommendations that I took away from something that I heard from him was like, don't watch what brands are doing, watch what people are doing responding to read the comments. You'll get so much more value from comments. You'll get so much more value from threads than you will from what that brand actually said or from what anyone said. Observe the people who are observing the thing, right? Mm-hmm. And that I think helps add a lot of context to the type of trends that we mm-hmm. come up with. And then it adds proof points, social proof, right? For what you may or may not recommend in the future. And also know that things are always evolving, right? So don't get caught up in the in the narrative of like, well, this platform is trending and it's going to be the next big thing. What about that platform is making it really sticky right now, right? This idea that, video, people are connecting on video, right? We're seeing a lot like the behavior is the trend, not the platform itself, right? Mm-hmm. So I would try to focus on that more so than some of these like quick hit, do this and your content's going to pop or blow up, right? It's like, well, why is TikTok so popular right now? Because of XYZ, because of these particular things, these behavioral things that we're seeing in society. So hopefully that's helpful.
That is so great. Well, thank you so much, Meredith. This was wonderful. Again, I appreciate you coming back and joining us to share digital trends that you all need to know. I hope you all found it informational and inspirational. Like I said, be sure to check out our upcoming summit, March 25th. It's on our website. Also, next week for She Rocks, we're going to be talking about your mid-career crisis. Obviously, this past year has impacted us not just professionally, but personally. And a lot of us are having a moment where we're saying, is what I'm doing enough? Do I have purpose elsewhere? So we'll be talking with Cheryl about that. So if that's something that is resonating with you right now, the Eventbrite is already up. I probably should find the link and send it to y'all. I'll drop it in here so you have it. So be sure to join us next week. Like I said, I encourage you all as well to check out our membership as well. Hold on. I should really see this link beforehand. I usually am not this far ahead on my stuff. I'm not going to lie to y'all. There it is. Copy the link and I'll put it in the chat so that all you will have it. And then I'll also make sure it goes into our Facebook group so that you guys don't miss it. Awesome. Meredith, thank you again. I hope you all have a great rest of your Friday and a wonderful weekend. Take care.
Thanks, everyone. Great meeting you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.